same words, with the same small flourish near the end where they
So
pause for
sa ating mga
effect.
kabarbo dyan,
And
magandang
something
umagahan,
shifts.
hapunan, tanghalian.
You are
Ito
not
lang po tayo,
angry.
makikinig lang tayo
You are
ng
not even disappointed
lecture
exactly.
about
You are simply
Carl Young.
suddenly
Check
awake.
out natin muna yung
You
audio
see the
natin. How are
lines
you guys
around their
doing today?
mouth.
Check mic 1,
You
2.
see the way they need you to laugh at the right moment, the way their eyes flick toward you to check that the story is landing. And you understand, with a quiet that is almost unbearable, that you have not been listening to them for a very long time. You have been listening to someone you invented. It can happen with a parent. You go home for a weekend and your mother, who was once the largest figure in the architecture of your world, reaches up to a high shelf and cannot quite manage it. Her hand trembles. She is shorter than you remember. And in that small failure of reach, the whole towering structure of her, the one who knew everything, who could fix everything, who was the weather of your childhood, quietly comes down. You see, perhaps for the first time, that she was frightened, that she was improvising, that she was a person the whole time, carrying her own unmet childhood inside her like a stone. It can happen with a lover. You wake before they do, and you look at their sleeping face in the grey light, and the face is just a face. It is not the face you fell in love with. The face you fell in love with was luminous, was destiny, was the answer to a question you had been asking your whole life without knowing it. This face has a small crust of sleep in one eye and a faint smell of last night's wine. You realize you have spent months, maybe years, painting over this face with another one. And now the paint has cracked and the actual person is showing through. And you do
Sa
not
ating
yet.
mga kabarbo dyan, review lang tayo ng itong understanding ni Carl Young. Sa ating mga kabarbo dyan, kung wala kayo guys ginagawa, hit that link and have a discussion with me and kwento-kwento lang tayo dyan. Sa ating mga kabrabo dyan, magandang umagahan, hapunan, kung saan man kayong sulok ng mundo. What's up sa inyo? At nakatapin po tayo dito sa understanding ni Carl Young.
Know whether what you feel is loss or relief. These moments are not catastrophes, though they can feel like one. Nothing has happened in the world of events. No betrayal. No argument. The person across the table, the parent on the stair, the lover in the grey light, they have not changed at all. What has changed is you. A film has dissolved. A spell you did not know you were under has lifted, and you are left blinking in the plainer light of the actual. Carl Jung had a word for the film, for the spell, for the luminous face that was never quite the real one. He called it projection, and he meant something very precise and very strange by it. He meant that we do not, for the most part, relate to other people at all. We relate to the images we cast upon them, the way a film projector throws its picture onto a blank screen and we forget, in the dark, that the screen was only ever a wall. The faces we love and the faces we hate are very often our own faces reflected back. We fall in love with our own unlived possibilities wearing someone else's body. We worship our own buried wisdom dressed up as a teacher. We despise in others the very things we cannot bear to find in ourselves. This is the story of the day that ends, the day a projection collapses. It is a story of grief because something dies. But it is also, if you can stay with it, the story of how you get yourself back. So let us begin where Jung began, which is with the uncomfortable suspicion that you have never actually met most of the people you love. Consider how little of another person you can actually perceive. You have their face, their voice, a handful of gestures, the things they choose to tell you. From these fragments you build an entire human being, a whole interior, a history, a set of motives, a soul. But you do not build it from nothing. You build it from yourself. The raw material of your image of another person is your own psyche, your hopes, your fears, your memories, your unmet needs. You take the few real pieces they give you and you fill in all the vast empty space around them with material that is in truth entirely your own. Jung described projection as an unconscious process, and that word unconscious is the whole difficulty. It does not feel like imagining. It feels like seeing. When you project, you do not experience yourself as adding anything. You experience the quality as simply being there in the other person, as plainly as the color of their coat. The man you find unbearably arrogant does not feel like a screen onto which you have thrown your own disowned pride. He feels arrogant objectively, obviously.
I was the first one to ever join the military in my family. When I got out, I knew that I wanted.
The woman you find enchanting does not feel like a hook on which you have hung your own longing for the numinous. She feels enchanting as a fact about her. This is the screen, and we live our whole emotional lives upon it. Jung's image was almost optical. The unconscious content, he said, finds a suitable object in the outer world and attaches itself there, and then we react to our own content as though it lived entirely outside us. The other person becomes a carrier. They are real, of course. There is a real screen behind every projected picture, but the intensity of what we feel, the charge, the heat, very often belongs to us and not to them. You can test this in a quiet way. Think of someone you find magnetic, someone whose mere presence rearranges the room for you. Now ask what specifically they have done to earn that charge. Often the honest answer is almost nothing. They smiled. They listened well, or seemed to. They withheld something, and the withholding gave your imagination room to work. The magnetism is largely your own electricity, grounding itself in a convenient body. And think of the reverse. Someone whose small habits enrage you out of all proportion. The way they chew, the way they need to be right, the way they perform humility. The disproportion is the clue. When our reaction is far larger than the cause, we are almost never responding only to the person in front of us. We are responding to something in ourselves that they have, unknowingly, touched. This is not a counsel of suspicion. Jung was not saying that other people are illusions or that intimacy is impossible. He was saying something gentler and harder, that before we can meet another person, we have to notice all the ways we are meeting ourselves instead. The first act of real relationship.
With just a few little twists. He was also, he's around 78, 72. Okay? Now, this is what you need to listen to. Something very extraordinary. In the late 70s, around 78, 79, right? Okay, this is what happened. A lot of people are not aware of. America dropped the first chemical war bomb in Cambodia and killed 2,600 people in a village. And they got it's classified. You can research.
Salud pala sa inyo guys. Ito nga guys, papakinig ko pala sa inyo itong recently na video na ipe-play ko na 'to na talaga namang maraming mga nangyayari at kayo na guys ang bahala. Salud sa ating mga kabrabo diyan na pakinggan natin 'to guys. Ito yung mga
Research these things yourself. Now, these are the facts we need to understand about graphene oxide, mRNA technology, meth, and methamphetamine, right? And amphetamine. I want you to listen to me carefully, okay? This was used in the days of the pharaohs, the great gods, and all these things. I've gone into many explanations about Plato, the greatest philosopher of all time, who studied human beings more than anybody. He's the greatest philosopher, and any philosopher ever since has only been footnotes of Plato. Consider the biggest problem in the world today is that people suffer the human conditioning. That means the whole world's going crazy, right? And I just want you to understand what the truth is. Okay?
you know, he said the whole world is getting crazy. Yun nga pagkakasabi guys, 1,000,000 and 800,000 Filipino sa Pilipinas right now are talaga naman sinasabi nga nakatikim nito guys ngayon pero sinasabi nito na talagang ito raw explosive itong produktong ito guys. Pero pakinggan nyo guys
Griffiths, the #1 biologist today, studied Plato and the human condition for 45 years. So consider this, right? Just consider these things. He's hailed by the 300 top scientists in the world for the IPCC reports, the ones on climate, the ones that tell you what the primary problem is that you're not even aware of because the politicians all over the world, scientists and professors, doctors and media systems can't face this, can't even wrap their head around it. But the biggest problem for climate is we cannot change mankind from the way he thinks. Okay, and he suffers the human conditioning by thinking in reverse psychology 95+% of the time, and many people are going into brain lock beyond the point of return, thinking psychologically, mentally, 100% of the time, completely disattached from their own soul and sold out. Think about this. That's what's happening. Now, so consider this for a moment, right? Jeremy Griffiths, the biggest biologist today, wrote the book Freedom, the Cure of the Human Condition that's going to save humanity. And believe me, I know exactly what I'm talking about. It's going to save humanity. Okay, the truth's going to set you free by thinking in the right mindset as a loving, compassionate creature. And freedom, right, is living in the truth, that you're in the wrong mindset. Okay, consider these things. You suffer the circumstances with a mental institutionalization, massive hypnotized state, and you suffer from stress, fear, anxiety, confusion, frustration, delusion, ADHD, psychosis, or paranoia every single day and live in denial about it exactly the same time, as if you're happy and as if you're free. But humanity's never been more unhappy. They've never been less free. And there's never been more negative vibrations spreading all over the world with people living in massive delusion, believing in theories rather than facts. Humanity's lost beyond comprehension. And that's why this story is extremely extraordinary. Now, they suffered the human condition in the days of Noah and became very evil, and God created the great flood. The pharaohs took 40,000 Israelites into slavery for 400 years and socially engineered them back to front and stripped them from their faith system. They went psychologically mental and started to suffer the human condition dramatically. Moses took them across to the desert, and they sat in the desert for 3 generations for 40 years, suffering the human condition psychologically, mentally, and completely disattached from their sixth sense and their own spirit, right? Consider these things. For 40 years, Moses goes back to the Pharaoh and gets bread with graphene oxide gold that they use. Excuse me.
Graphene oxide gold, right, guys? Graphene mixed with gold.
Gets some bread with graphene oxide gold and takes it back to the Israelites in the desert, and a one-time activation. A one-time activation where they eat the bread and then they restore their faith system to conduct to light, power, and energy, and then they have faith in God, right, and get their priorities right and stop suffering the human conditioning. That's why this is so extraordinary that you need to pay attention to. People suffering from all sorts of mental disorders, from stress, fear, anxiety, confusion, frustration, delusion, ADHD, psychosis, or paranoia, got activated in such a way that they were free from all these dark entities. And I just want you to consider that, because this might tell you a lot of things about life in the time that you're in now. One-time activation. Graphene oxide gold is the highest conductor in the world, right? And also has a tools of immortality. You can Google and study these things through scholar reports and all this, and I can guarantee you gold, right, is classified, right, as a molecule of immortality. And we create 2 molecules of immortality from the back of our pineal gland with graphene oxide, iodine graphene oxide. So I want you to consider that. I want you to consider that you create this, a conductor to 7-fold wisdom and knowledge, right? That makes your body cells receive 7 times more information in the most positive fields. But you have to be in the right mindset and have absolute faith in your human instincts that it is your spirit, right, that's trying to guide you through your third eye, your pineal gland, through your feelings. You feel things between right, wrong, good and evil. And that's what I want you to have faith in, right? Because we're stripped from this. We're completely stripped from this and socially engineered not to have faith in this. So understand this, right? You're a creature of feelings. And by following your feelings, right, by following your feelings and everything you feel, you can feel the truth and heartbeat with adrenaline, and no one can manipulate you. When you have faith and confidence within yourself, right, to understand the abilities that you can do and the access that you have, right, you can do extraordinary things. You just got to have faith and confidence within yourself to understand these things. But these people,
it's always within, guys. It's always within. It's always inside you. The powers is in. You don't have to look nothing outside. Nothing is about. It's always inside of you. It's you, the vessel.
don't. And that's what you've got to understand, because that population is growing dramatically, right, with psychological, selfish, egotistical behavior to be competitive. And you know it's true. It's happening all over the world. Moral values crashing. So, graphene oxide, right, gold, was used as a conductor, right, and the great gods of Egypt had superhuman abilities, right? They were known as gods because they could do extraordinary things. Graphene oxide gold is also used, right, to create hybrids. And you can Google this. That's what it's used for in the modern world today. It's used to create hybrids. Graphene oxide is used for mRNA technology. It's also used for gene editing. It's one of the most extraordinary things in the world that you need to pay attention to, no matter what you believe in. I don't recommend taking things. I don't recommend you take drugs or any of these things. I'm trying to explain something about you that you have the natural ability to do. And that's why you've got to pay attention. I'm one of the biggest mentalists recorded on the planet that knows more about this than practically any other human being on earth does. So then the Israelites were taken back into slavery by the Persians and the Greeks for 300 to 400 years. And exactly the same thing happened where they were stripped from their human abilities, stripped from their sixth sense, and went psychologically mental. And again, were activated with graphene oxide gold. And I just want you to consider these things because they knew that by then. That's one thing they did know.
Graphene oxide gold
So I want you to understand something.
is
In the days of
able
Jesus, the whole
for
public
your
went mentally
body
crazy.
to
Mentally crazy. They all stoned him in the streets. The most perfect human being on
unlock
earth
yung
that was here to
pineal gland.
guide you with love, care, compassion, loyalty, honor, respect, moral, empathy, and remorse. And he was very confronting. He didn't come here with chocolates and roses. He came here with a sword to divide mankind between good and evil. And that's what he stood against. Good and evil, right? Understand that. And evil exists in everything, especially when you talk about religions to control mankind, working with the governments, right, who wants to control you with authoritarian control and behavior. And Jesus stood against the system, and they were known as outlaws, right? Everybody stoned him in the street because the whole public, right, in the Roman days were also socially needed to be psychologically mental. And that's why you see so many people stoning Jesus, and only 11 people believed in Jesus until he resurrected. Consider that. So what I'm trying to tell you is that there's even a section, right, where Jesus goes and feeds 5,500 people, right? Okay, 5,500 people with bread as well, just like Moses. But where did that bread come from? Because they activated. They activated, and from that moment, they had absolute faith within themselves, and stopped suffering the human conditioning. Isn't that extraordinary? Because I think it should be very extraordinary, and you should pay attention, because this has been used throughout the whole history, right? So I want you to consider something very carefully. In 1885, the Japanese created the kamikaze, and that was the first time they created mRNA technology with a bioweapon, which was methamphetamine, 1/3 iodine crystals, which is graphene oxide sheets, which is mRNA technology. So
You know, 19 ulitin natin to, guys. Ulitin to natin, guys. Talagang kaya napakadaming nahulog sa ating bansa, guys. Pakinggan nyo to, guys. Oh.
And that was the first time they created mRNA technology carefully and stopped suffering the human conditioning. Isn't that extraordinary? Because I think it should be very extraordinary, and you should pay attention, because this has been used throughout the whole history, right? So I want you to consider something very carefully. In 1885, the Japanese created the kamikaze, and that was
Pakinggan nyo to, guys. Oh.
the first time they created mRNA technology with a bioweapon, which was methamphetamine, 1/3 iodine crystals, which is graphene oxide sheets, which is mRNA technology. So consider this. Meth also does what? It's a truth serum, the most powerful truth serum in the world that proves who you really are, right? That proves who you really are when made laboratorily correct. So you can also pick out human beings that are very loving and compassionate creatures, and most people who take meth are. But you don't know that. You only know about the evil ones. Believe me, most people take meth, right? They follow their human instincts, because meth only manipulates your mind with your serotonin and all your endorphins. It only manipulates you to activate, right? Okay, when you take methamphetamine, you're pumped with adrenaline, right? And you become activated, right? So when you consider something, 0 to 7, you're activated consistently, and you don't suffer any mental disorders. At 3 years old, you mastermind a computer game. By the time you're 7, you do it instinctively with an undeveloped brain to think with, and you can't be manipulated. So let me tell you something. You create these molecules to conduct, and you conduct to 7 times more positive bound energy. We receive 7 times more information, and that information can be seen in a child between 3 and 7 when they mastermind a computer game and move 3 times faster than any adult can, because then they go to school and the wheels fall off, and then the chemicals die, and you become confused, right, and social engineered into a mental institutionalization.
So lahat sa ating mga kabro-bro dyan, I appreciate you guys so much for stopping by the stream. Talagang pinapakinggan lang natin itong video na to, guys. Pakinggan nyo
Right?
to, guys.
You can do extraordinary things. You just got to have faith and confidence within yourself to understand these things yourself. Now, these are the facts we need to understand. And they got busted for this. This became out. This is what you need to listen to. Something very extraordinary. In the late 70s, around 78, 79, right? Okay, this is what happened. A lot of people are not aware of. America dropped the first chemical war bomb in Cambodia and killed 2,600 people in a village. And they got busted for this. This became international pressure and was on TV all over the world, right? But you can't even look it up on Google, right? A lot of people my age will remember this. So what happened here is America got busted for testing the first chemical war bomb in Cambodia and killed a village and wiped out a village of 2,600 people. And it hit international news all over the world, right? Huge issue. America busted for doing this. And of course, America was never going to admit to that, just like everything else, right? They lie their teeth out about everything, right? So understand this. There was only one professor, right, that could build this bomb, this first chemical war bomb, right? Now, that professor, I will give you his name, as known as Uncle Fester. Uncle Fester was the most dedicated scientist and professor with NASA, who was working with all the scientists from Hitler on meth programs and made many different types of amphetamines and meth. He was the king, and he was the absolute leader in constructing new recipes for all these things. Meth is also practically the same as a chemical bomb, with just a few little twists. He was also a chemical bomb expert who created the first chemical warhead and the first chemical bomb that done this job. Now, America could not take responsibility for this. They couldn't take responsibility for this because this was really ugly. So they claimed, right, that somebody else did it, right? And somebody else set all this shit up, not them. And the only way they could get away with this, right, the only way they could do this was actually point Fester out as if he was the one that built the bomb and sent it to some underground network, some terrorist network that dropped it. So I want you to consider this. Fester was a Nobel Prize winner. Okay, he was dedicated his life, right, to his research and all the things he was doing, right? He wasn't the type of person who was evil in any way, shape, or form, but they were going to use him as a fool guy. But I want you to pay attention to the story, right, because you need to be aware of something about Fester, right, and understand what really happened here, right, because it's extraordinary. So it's all over the world, right? It's all over the world, right? And this is becoming so big that they want to watch the court case inside the courtroom so that no one gets cheated. Okay, so Europe, right, put on international pressure to see this case on live TV, and so did the whole of Asia, right? So this became a very complicated issue, right? A very complicated issue, but it had to be dealt with immediately. So let me tell you something, right? This is exactly what happened, and this is exactly why you need to seriously be aware. Seriously be aware. Fester goes to court, and you don't go to court without a lawyer, right? Unless you're a barrister or something like that, right? Unless you're completely confident within yourself, right? Fester comes to court without a lawyer, and he's green, right? He's the most green person you could ever get. But this is what happens. He's accused for killing 2,600 people and facing the electric chair, yet he's innocent, completely innocent. I just want you to think about these things, right? Because in my opinion, this is constructed, right, perfectly, okay, perfectly. And I know more about this, And I'm about to let you know that later in the story. That's going to blow your mind away. My connection with this is unbelievable. So Fester goes into court, and this is what he says. He says, Your Honor, with all due respect, okay, I just want to say something to you. I'm the head scientist that creates this. It is my duty to do an outline of submission with the recipe and all the components that goes into this. It is my duty to write out this outline of submission and what the recipe is, and I'm the only one that knows it. It is my duty to take those documents right through Parliament House to deem those documents and to deem this product to be illegal and also to be dangerous. And since that process has not been done yet, and I'm the only one that has the recipe, and such documents have never been filed, for argument's sake, if I was guilty of doing this, right, under the Fifth Amendment, I have a right to build those arms and sell it to anyone without questioning them, okay? But the fact is this outline of submission with this recipe has never been filed to Parliament House and has never been deemed to be legal, right, or dangerous. And considering I'm the one and the only one that knows this, isn't it to stand to basic common sense that if no such document has been provided and this has not been deemed yet, then therefore I cannot be charged for this in any way, shape or form, and I'm not guilty until such time that it's been filed and deemed to be dangerous and deemed to be illegal. Now, with the world watching this, Fester wins the court case on technicality. There was no choice in that because he was innocent, regardless of what the circumstances was. So consider this. The USA, he's working for the USA for the government, and anyone who works for the government has their taxes taken out automatically. Everybody knows that. He had worked for the government for more than 20 years, right? And he was a #1 scientist in these projects and worked with the scientists, right, from Hitler, right, who were the head scientists with MDMA, right? And they created MDMA and all the different products of meth and amphetamine. So consider this. This is the situation. America then says, we're going to put him away. Don't worry. We're not going to let him get away with this. So they hold on to Fester. Then they charge him on 6 counts of tax evasion. And they want to give him 10 years for each count, one on top of the other, which is 60 years. And they promise the public they're going to do this. So 3 weeks later, Fester comes into court charged for 6 counts of tax evasion. And this is what happens in the tax evasion case. And this is going to get your attention beyond your comprehension. Fester comes in and Fester says, if you put me away for this, I'm going to give you the biggest drug problem, right, that's going to smash into Europe and smash onto Florida shores, and I'm going to give you the world's biggest problems with drugs, right, that you cannot comprehend and you cannot control. I want you to think about this, okay? Fester threatens the US government and the president himself that if he gets put away from this, he's going to give the world the biggest drug problem, right? Consider that for a moment, right? Then Fester gets put away for 60 years. As far as the public knows, as far as everybody else knows in the whole world, they think that he's just put away for 60 years. But I know different. I know very different, right? So now I want you to listen to me very carefully. His wife and his partner in NASA, and I'm not going to go into names, I'm just going to tell you a very simple story. 2 of his top partners inside NASA working with him moves into Ormo, Australia in 1980. They start 5 massive criminal networks immediately. At this time, I want you to understand something. Amphetamine was sold over the pharmaceutical counters up to 1978 at exactly the same time, right? And this will make you realize it's part of a plan. Okay, it's deemed to be the safest drug in the world, and truckies all over Australia and many people in the building trades, they buy it over the chemistry counters, over the pharmaceutical counters without a prescription, and it's deemed to be the safest drug. More than 80% of our truckies, right, and our whole industry was on amphetamine and buying it over the counter without a prescription. And these are the facts that no one wants to tell you. These are the facts. This was in 1978, right? And then they brought a law in against pseudoephedrine because pseudoephedrine was deemed to be dangerous. It's a synthetic drug. Okay, it's made with chemicals, right? And it's man-made. That's why it's called pseudo. Okay, ephedrine comes from a plant called mayhung, right? The original source and the organic source comes from a plant called mayhung, right? When made laboratorily correct, it has no human side effect. And I just want you to consider that for a moment, okay? Now,
You know, Matindi guys, ang mga binitawan niya. Sa ating mga kabro dyan, magandang tanghalian na punan kung saan man kayong sulok ng mundo. Talaga na maraming mga information na lumalabas ngayon na talagang hindi natin na masyado maintindihan guys. You know what I mean? Ganun pa man. How are you guys doing today? Kung saan man kayo.
Beautiful, profound, and utterly isolating. But the second experience is even more
Ayun, sana, makamit ninyo guys lahat ng gusto ninyo. Magandang tanghalian, hapunan, kung saan man kayo sulok ng mundo. What's up naman sa inyo guys diyan? You know me? How are you guys doing today? What's up, what's up, what's up? You know me? Nakikinig lang tayo ng mga happy Saturday to you guys. Mga dito sa YouTube, mga content creator. Why is spirituality awaken people stop aging? Carl Jung. Ba, teka, 24 million. Maganda yung na yun, ha? Pakinggan natin to, guys.
This program has been designed to teach anyone who's interested in learning technical support fundamentals, computer networking, operating systems.
You have seen it on someone's face, and you could not explain what you were seeing. Maybe it was a grandparent. Maybe it was someone you met once and thought about for years afterward. Maybe it was someone you passed on the street whose face made
Maganda tong na to ng pag-uusapan natin to guys about kay Carl Jung. Ito ang sinasabi, why is spiritually awakened people stop aging? Yung mga chemical trigger, chemical imbalances na talagang nangyari sa katawan ng isang tao. At sinasabi nilang mukhang hindi na siya tumatanda. Salot sa ating mga kabrober niyo. Pakinggan natin guys ang ito na sinabi ni Carl Jung. Marami to guys, marami ditong mga pinapakinggan ko, pinapanood ko at ito kay mga nasa algorithm ko. Sinabi, the final stage. Ano kayo na final stage do? Pero ganun pa man guys ito muna pakinggan natin.
you look twice without knowing exactly why. A person who by all objective measures should look their age, who has lived through real difficulty, who has not had an easy life or unusual access to resources or any of the external advantages that are supposed to correlate with looking young. And yet there is something in their face that is not old in the way you would expect it to be. It is not that the wrinkles are absent. It is not that time has not marked them. It is something underneath the marks of time, a quality of life behind the eyes, a specific ease in the way they hold their face and body, an aliveness that registers before you can name it, and that does not match the arithmetic of what the years should have done to them. Carl Jung noticed this in his patients and spent years trying to understand it. He saw it consistently across his clinical career in patients.
Questioning, is it those people with the most emotional scar that triggered a certain part of the body that they no longer age. Pakinggan po natin and let's listen to what Carl Jung said.
Who had undergone significant inner transformation and who carried in their face and in their body and in the specific quality of how they occupied space, something that did not correspond to the arithmetic of their years. He could not initially explain it in terms that satisfied him scientifically, because it was not explainable in terms of the variables he knew how to measure. But the consistency of the observation across enough patients eventually forced him to take it seriously as a phenomenon rather than as a coincidence. And the explanation he eventually arrived at is one of the most important and most underappreciated things he ever documented. What he eventually concluded disturbs the comfortable story most people tell themselves about aging, not because it requires any mystical framework to accept, but because it requires something the culture is much less comfortable with than mysticism, which is the acknowledgement that most people's faces are telling a story that their owners are not consciously aware they are telling, a story about the specific relationship between who they are performing themselves to be and who they actually are, written in the specific tension and ease of the muscles, and the specific quality of the skin, and the specific aliveness or absence of aliveness behind the.
Especially with social media, especially with television, especially with all of this news, that now somehow, somewhere along the line, a person can no longer be as authentic as he can, but because a person is performing every day in a different type of settings. Who are you performing to? I'm salute to this type of, understanding. I appreciate you guys for stopping by the stream. Make sure you guys press that like button.
the eyes. Because it is not a story about genetics or lifestyle or skincare or the absence of stress. It is a story about something that happens inside the psyche when a person undergoes genuine spiritual awakening, and about the specific physiological changes that transformation produces in the face and the body, and the quality of presence in ways that nothing available on the outside of a person can produce. The first thing to understand is what Jung meant by the word transformation, because it gets used so loosely in popular psychology that it has nearly lost its meaning. Transformation has been applied to everything from changing your morning routine to switching careers to going through a difficult breakup. None of these are what Jung meant. When Jung used it, he was pointing to something specific, the moment at which a person stops being primarily organized around the management of how they are perceived and starts being primarily organized around the truth of what they actually are. This is not a subtle shift. The management of how you are perceived is one of the most metabolically expensive things a human being does. It requires the continuous monitoring of every interaction for signals about how you are landing, the continuous editing of your self-expression to stay within the limits of what is acceptable, the continuous suppression of the parts of your experience that do not fit the current social context, and the continuous maintenance of a version of yourself that is optimized for approval rather than for truth. This is running in the background of every interaction, every conversation, every room you walk into, consuming processing power that would otherwise be available for the interaction itself. This is why people who have done significant inner work can seem so much more present than people who have not, even when the interaction they are in is exactly the same. The person who is not running the management program in the background has more of themselves available for the foreground, more attention available, more genuine responsiveness, more of the actual quality of their inner life available for the actual quality of the encounter. And this shows. It shows in the face, and it shows in the eyes.
What if I guaranteed you 1 million views or you didn't pay anything? That's not a pitch. That's literally our offer. Here's why we can make it work. Our average client gets 15.5.
It shows in how they listen. It shows in the specific quality of being genuinely heard that people describe feeling in the presence of someone who is not spending a significant portion of their attention on themselves while they are also attending to you. And it has been running since you were young enough to learn that certain versions of you were welcome and certain versions of you were not. The nervous system does not get a break from it. The jaw does not relax from it. And the people who have been running this program longest are the people who are most thoroughly convinced that what they are experiencing is simply normal, simply how life feels, simply the ordinary weight of being a responsible adult in a demanding world. They do not experience the management program as a burden because they have never had sustained access to a version of their daily life in which the management program was not running. It is the specific tragedy of the most common form of chronic human suffering, which is that it is invisible from inside the experience of it precisely because it has been the experience for long enough that it has become indistinguishable from what experience simply is. The muscles around the eyes do not stop bracing for it. The breath does not deepen past the level that the management of the social situation permits. All of this, sustained across decades, is written on the face, not because of the years, but because of the continuous internal effort the years contained. And this is the point that most people never encounter clearly enough to do anything with. The face does not age primarily because of time. It ages primarily because of what happens during the time. Two people who have lived the same number of years, but who have inhabited those years in fundamentally different internal conditions, will not look the same age. Not because of their genetics or their diet or their access to good skincare, because of the specific relationship between their authentic self and the life they have been living, and whether that relationship has been one of integration or one of continuous suppression. The suppressed person
If you can be as authentic as you can, if you can be as you you will have a long lasting journey, amazing life down there in this earth. So, but it's all up to you.
Carries the suppression visibly, even when they do not feel it consciously. The integrated person carries the integration visibly too. That is what you were seeing on the face that you could not explain. You were seeing the accumulated physiological signature of someone who had been at less war with themselves than most people manage to be. The second thing to understand is what the face is actually expressing when it is expressing something other than the marks of biological time. The face is the surface of the nervous system. What lives in the nervous system lives in the face. A person who has been in chronic low-level stress for 30 years has that stress in their face not as a cosmetic problem but as a structural condition, as the specific holding pattern of the muscles that are maintained continuously by a nervous system that has been running an alarm state for so long that the alarm state has become the baseline. The jaw is slightly tighter than it needs to be. The muscles around the eyes are slightly braced. The forehead holds a tension that is not a response to a current situation, but a residue of every situation that required the suppression of something real. These are not dramatic tensions. You would not see them in a photograph necessarily. You would feel them in the room. There is a quality of slight bracing in the presence of the person who is carrying this tension in their face that is felt before it is named. A quality of encountering someone who is somewhat defended even when they are being warm and available and genuinely kind. The bracing registers even through the kindness, and the absence of bracing in the person who has released it registers equally immediately, equally below the threshold of conscious assessment. This is what people mean when they say they feel at ease with someone before they know why. What they are feeling is the absence of the defense. And the absence of the defense is the direct physiological result of an inner life that has stopped needing the defense
You know,
because the conditions that
sometimes a person is built up in within themselves that they could really feel the moment they even walk into that room. The moment this, what I mean? Salute sa mga kabro dyan. I appreciate you guys for stopping by the stream. That's my time for today. And we're gonna tap in for more of this type of talk, guys.
The website
And
you've got
you
in
know
your
what I mean?
head, build it now with Base 44.
The human race is not going to flourish harmoniously unless we are enabled to love each other. But the question is, how do you get it? You cannot imitate this thing. There is no way of getting it, and yet it is absolutely essential that we have it. And the reason why the Lord God says at the beginning of things, thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and with all thy soul and with all thy mind, is not because the Lord God is stupid, but because he's very clever. That which appears to be a commandment is actually a challenge, or what in Zen Buddhism would be called a koan, a spiritual problem. Because if you exercise yourself resolutely in trying to love God and or your neighbor, you will find that you get more and more tangled up. You will realize increasingly that the reason why you are attempting to obey this as a commandment is that you want to be the right kind of person. And obviously you want to be the right kind of person for your own reasons. And so if you do, in the first place, feel selfish and come to the conclusion, as a result of trying various experiments with love, that you love yourself more than anybody else, the proper thing to do is to investigate your self-love, to find out why you love yourself and what you mean by yourself when you say you love yourself.
You know, you really have to investigate. Do you do really care and love yourself? Because before we could love anyone else, make sure ourself is good. Salud sa ating mga kabro-bro dyan, ha? We appreciate you guys so much for stopping by at the show. This is all on my algorithm, and I listen to and I tap into this type of understanding. At you know what I mean? I appreciate you guys so much for for stopping by the stream, and that's all. It's my time for today.
Love is not something that is a sort of rare commodity.
Salamat sa inyo dyan,
Everybody
guys.
has it. Existence is love. But it's like water flowing through a hose. It depends in which direction you point it.
Salamat sa inyo dyan.
So
Ingat
everybody
kayo lagi
has
dyan.
the force
Andyan
running.
na po ang aking
And
time.
people, of course,
Ingat po
tend
kayo
to
lagi
distinguish
dyan.
between the various kinds of love. There are good kinds, such as divine charity, and allegedly bad kinds, such as, in quotes, animal lust. But it should be understood, I think, that they are all forms of the same thing, but they differ.